everybody. Welcome to another episode of Continuous Discussions, the online panel where we talk about Agile, DevOps, and continuous delivery. I'm Sam.
And I'm Anders Welken. And today we're going to predict the future. Actually, we do that every day, but today especially we're going to predict the future.
Yeah. Hold on, I got to share my screen here.
I predict that Sam is about to show us live. And it's going to say 2019 on it.
Boom! Eventually. Come on, Google. There we go.
All right, so today's topic, DevOps trends, predictions, and New Year's resolutions. So we're going to talk a little bit about kind of what the driving forces were in the DevOps community this year, 2018. And then what do we see, what do we foresee shaping the industry for the years to come, or the year to come, I guess. But that'll be the topic for today. And we'll dive right into it with our awesome set of panelists.
An amazing set of panelists, people who talk with folks year in, year out about this topic. First one on our list is someone who's pretty familiar to the program, Mike Cavish. Say hello.
Hello from chilly Florida. Chilly means 50-something degrees.
So Mike, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. So I'm Chief Cloud Architect at Deloitte Consulting. Been doing this cloud thing for a good 10, 11 years. Also have a podcast, do podcasts with a lot of the key people in the industry, and just happy to be here and share some predictions.
Wonderful. We're happy to have you join us again. Jane Grohl, welcome back to the program.
Hey, everyone. So excited to be here in 2019 already. I'm coming to you from sort of chilly Fort Lauderdale, Florida, so maybe a little warmer than Mike, but by Florida standards, not much. I'm CEO of the DevOps Institute. If you're not familiar with the DevOps Institute, we are a member-based association for DevOps professionals, really immersed in continuous learning and skilling. And we also accredit 7 DevOps certifications. So get a lot of time at a lot of conferences, talking to people about what they're doing in their DevOps initiatives. We have 140 partners around the world, so we really do get a little bit of a global perspective of where DevOps is today and we think where it's going tomorrow.
Lovely. Well, we're interested to hear what you found. And the next person I'll introduce, new to the program, but not new to the space, Charlie Betts. Introduce yourself.
Hey, Sam, and hey, all. Charlie Betts. I'm the principal analyst and global DevOps lead with Forrester Research, serving infrastructure and operations professionals. I've been involved in various aspects of IT management, enterprise architecture, DevOps for a long time now, as well as some of the adjacencies like IT service management, which I continue to cover at Forrester, as well as DevOps. And looking forward to talking about what's happened and where we're going.
Wonderful. All right. Thanks, Charlie. And last but not least is another repeat offender on the program, Jay Lyman from sunny Hawaii. Say hello.
Aloha, Sam and all. Thanks for having me. I'm a principal analyst with 451 Research. I work on our applied infrastructure and DevOps team, cover containers, microservices, serverless, and cloud native technologies, as well as DevOps, and have been talking with large enterprises and, of course, the vendors for a long time about it. So, yeah, looking forward to our discussion today.
Wonderful. We're happy to have you all back. So let's go ahead and dive right in. The first topic of conversation is, if you look in the rearview mirror, some of you had some predictions about last year, which would be interesting to hear whether or not those predictions came true, to see whether or not we should bother to listen to your predictions for this year. But also just looking back at 2018 and what we actually saw, what the actuals were, I think would be interesting. So I'm not sure who we should start with. I'm going to, and Jane, your face was up when I came back off of my screen over here. So I'm going to ask you, what did you see in 2018? What were some of the things that you guys, were noticing?
So are we Jay or Janing?
Jane with an N. Ladies first.
Okay, so I mean, I'm happy to lead off. I wasn't doing this with you guys last year, so I can't tell you whether any of my predictions.
I remember what I predicted last year. So.
I predicted he would forget,
but
and I nailed it.
all my predictions come true. No, I think really 2018 was a really interesting year because I personally think we saw a little bit of a pivot. I think up until 2018, so I started looking at DevOps in about 2012. And so, you started to see across the chasm, you started to see industries, move over to the enterprise space, and a lot of talk about what is DevOps, trying to find a definition that people could wrap their heads around, trying to figure out, is it the same as continuous delivery? Is it, is it bigger than that? Is it smaller than that? And I think in 2018, we stopped asking the question of what is DevOps and started to ask the question of how do we do it, right? So, I think the question's been asked and answered, and you can answer that definition any way that makes sense to you. I think a lot of companies have started dialoguing about what DevOps means to them and how they start to create their own kind of path. And I'm hoping that in 2018, because we have a lot more curiosity about how do I do this, right? How do I as an individual and organization do it? And so I think that's a really big paradigm shift. Right, that we're going to, and I won't get into my 2019 yet, but I do think that's a big shift, is that there's a lot more curiosity about, okay, I buy the concept, how do I do it?
Right. Excellent. And were you seeing that as far as because you're delivering this training and you're delivering this knowledge to all these folks across the world, were you seeing that translate itself into people looking for more of that type of training, looking for topics, more advanced topics? How did that manifest itself in your world?
So DevOps Institute, we don't do any direct training, but through our partners, we've now certified over 10,000 people. So that's a pretty good number. And, when you look at kind of the spread geographically into, there isn't like one region or another that we could say, oh, it's 10,000 people in North America. There's really kind of an interesting reach there. So we've definitely seen more of an uptake of curiosity, both from a training and certification perspective. But I know the questions that I get asked, I speak at a lot of conferences, are really more like, that's really great. How do we change our culture? How do we build pipeline? What about security? And so the questions are starting to become more detailed than, okay, so what is DevOps?
Mm-hmm. Excellent. All right, great. Thank you, Jane. Mike, what are your thoughts on this? 2018, when you look back, what are you seeing?
Yeah, I see a couple tech trends, and then I'll talk about DevOps, but obviously a surge in serverless and containers. The demand. So a little background, I've been in the consulting business for 5-6 years. So the phone calls I'm getting are geared a lot towards those two technologies. But on the DevOps front, I've been with big clients on DevOps since 2015, and it used to be all about CI/CD. And now, kind of as Jane said, they've gone beyond that, and it's like, what's a new operating model look like? We're now in the cloud, but now it's chaos. We don't know how to run this stuff, and it's more about people and process now and leadership than it was about how do I do a build, how do I do a deployment.
Mm-hmm. So people are moving beyond the more fundamental atomic units of automation into how do I push all this stuff together in a way that makes sense for my business and enables that flow through that pipeline, basically getting value out to my customers.
Yeah, they're growing through the maturity curve, and they're getting to a point where what's the next bottleneck? Well, the bottleneck used to be I didn't have a consistent build or environment hell. A lot of companies have gotten through that. Now what's the problem? Well, I got this process. I can do a build in 5 minutes, but it takes me 30 days to get it out the door because of these archaic processes. So people are starting to look at those things, and that's the hard stuff.
Right. Yeah. Interesting. All right. Great. Jay.
Yeah. Why? I think picking up on what Mike said a little bit, we do see this spread. And by the way, my prediction of more DevOps adoption came true. I left, it was a pretty big target. I think I gave myself, but I did sort of predict more mainstream DevOps adoption. What I didn't predict was the degree to which DevOps was living with the other methodologies that we've got out there. We did a survey mid-year, and still plenty of waterfall, still plenty of ITIL, and you've got DevOps and 12 Factor and Six Sigma, and it's really spread across the board. So DevOps is continuing to grow, but as organizations scale up, as they go to production, the closer they get to those other methodologies and rubbing up against that. So that sort of struck me, I think, in 2018. And then the other big thing that we saw was the consolidation in cloud native applications. We started last year or this year with Red Hat's acquisition of CoreOS. Then, of course, we had the IBM acquisition of Red Hat. And then VMware's acquisition of Heptio. So, that has some big impacts in terms of talent and customer reaction to that. So that's something interesting to see. And spoiler alert, I expect to see more of that consolidation in 2019.
Right.
The Kubernetes market, for example, is really ripe for it, with a lot of large, the big established vendors and a lot of newcomers, new startups. So that's definitely a recipe for M&A.
Yeah, exactly. These new companies solving these real problems for this brand new operating model.
Yeah.
A brand new sort of way of doing the technology. That's interesting. Awesome. Thanks, Jay. Charlie, what are you hearing when you're talking in 2018?
Well, so a lot of what's already been said. Definitely concern for the operating model. The typical inquiry for me with DevOps is, hey, we got through a proof of concept and we got through with a pilot and it's great. And now we're trying to roll it out to the enterprise and we're stuck with organizational change management issues and operating model issues. And what do we do about ITIL? And what about the NOC? And what about the service desk? And can we really have product? Can we really rip out the PMO and go to a full product team structure? And our current structure of demand doesn't, the demand structure, the pipeline doesn't work. We're running the numbers. We haven't got the right staff. And there's a lot of cultural resistance. And you dig into the cultural resistance and you start finding that it's because you've beaten people up for the last 20 years with PMO dogma, that it's all about planning the work and working the plan. And if you just plan enough, then everything will be okay. And now you're trying to tell people, well, no, experimentation is good. Failure is good.
Right.
Yeah.
And this is not easily assimilated. So yeah, it's an interesting year.
There really was a change in 2018 from my perspective in terms of if I was out talking to prospective customers, they were way more educated this year than they were in previous years about Agile, about DevOps, about CD. There's still a lot of confusion about what the overlap and how these things interact and what comes first and what's an overall kind of issue and what's a niche issue and all of those kinds of things. But way more educated consumer than a year ago, which I think was interesting, because the first half hour of any meeting was always, what is DevOps and why do I care?
What is it? Yeah, exactly. And then people have moved past that.
As much anymore.
The one thing I'm questioning, and I'm gonna actually say something here that may not be popular. I'm wondering if we've reached peak DevOps, not in the sense that people are going to walk away from it, but in the sense of the Jeffrey Moore crossing the chasm. At some point, you cross from early adopters to late adopters. We're now in the late adopters. We've been at this for 10 years now, folks. At some point, you are going to have late adopters and then laggards, and then you've really gone through a pretty successful cycle. But the rate of acceleration, we saw it in inquiry data this year. The acceleration, in the rate of inquiries definitely wasn't there this year.
Yeah, and I think I think what a lot of people are realizing too is that application architectures, especially existing applications, really can hinder you in adopting these things, both from a technology point of view, from a process point of view, all of those kinds of things. So
collaboration.
Companies are really struggling with that because you don't necessarily want to stop and rebuild the world, the right way, but at the same time, having legacy architectures is really slowing people down and hurting velocity. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with that going forward. Obviously, we're not going to throw everything out and start over.
That would be great, though, wouldn't it? That'd be. That's right. Just build it twice, and then you're fine. That's good.
Well, I think and some of you referenced it. I think we also suffer from framework fatigue, and so it's like, I was on a panel recently at an event, and it was like I felt like a used car salesman. Like, oh, buy my framework, right? And there was somebody there representing ITIL, and someone there representing Verism, and someone representing Agile, and it really felt like buy mine, buy mine. And so, as the market, every few years we kind of shift and say, hey, this year it's invest millions and millions of dollars in ITIL, and now it's invest millions and millions, and they all work together. It's not an either or. But I do think that we're reaching as an industry, kind of this place where we have such framework fatigue. No one loves frameworks more than IT, right? And we have no shortage of them. And so I think that the observation that, and I think it was Jay that said that, how does this all work together, right? Is really starting to be, and that may be where we look at DevOps as almost like a super framework. But again, I think that's a very, very big issue because we're kind of crushing, budgets and investments and asking them like now we need control. Oh, now you need disruption. It's kind of like, you get a puppy and the puppy runs wild around your house, doing some kind of damage. You put it in a cage and you say, well, you will stay in your crate. And then you open the crate and they don't want to come out. So, I mean, it is a little bit of this kind of analogy of, we don't know what to do.
Well, actually, they might just break out of the cage and do the damage anyway. That's been my experience.
I want disruption, but I want control. But I want disruption. Wait a minute.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. Now, if you're 25 and you haven't come from the legacy of, ITIL command and control now suddenly to, hey, let's experiment. You don't suffer from that kind of, paranoia. But if you've been in IT for more than 10 years, you're probably suffering from I think I'll just do nothing because I don't know what to do anymore.
Yeah, well, I experimented when I was back at State Farm. I was the Claim Systems DP Analyst 3, and I experimented with some of the JCL, and I brought down all the different claims regions at 3 o'clock in the morning. So that was my oops.
Oh.
Is that a career move?
Yeah, and then I didn't work there anymore. I don't know. It's kind of weird.
Today you would be applauded. Learn, fail fast and learn from it.
That we're sort of highlighting this thing that DevOps, the disruption of that is, in my mind, most of the disruption in DevOps is on the IT ops side. Those are the folks that are having to face this dramatic change from command and control, stability at all costs, to don't be afraid to fail, which unless it's going to get publicized, right? So but it is a big change for those folks, and I think we're starting to see that. The deeper, the more mainstream DevOps goes, the more it's affecting those folks. That it's really disrupting what they do.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's there's a huge advantage to people that can start fresh, whether it's a startup or a greenfield application team that they build their own little pirate flag and all that kind of stuff. But if you're an existing enterprise with applications that are bringing in money and keeping the lights on, and it's a really difficult struggle to make the shift. And at the same time, competitively, you're getting disrupted from above.
You have to.
Right? And you have to. You have no choice.
And you've got to retrain your people. There just aren't enough new people coming in. I mean, we've got pipeline issues that are growing, and we've got an aging populations, and there's all kinds of structural reasons. You have to invest in your people and bring them forward. And in some cases, Jane, to your point, I mean, paranoia, absolutely. I've seen it too. I'd call it, post PFSD, post framework stress disorder, And it's not so much the frameworks as the operating and it's not even the operating model. It's ultimately what people experienced, what we read about in the Phoenix Project, the overburden, just the immense multitasking, just the complete feeling of being out of control, and then responding by controlling what you can, and that leads to not the best environment for change.
Right, but it's like Darth Vader when he's trying to grab the grains of sand, and Princess Leia says, the tighter you grasp, the more they'll slip through your fingers. Darth Vader nailed it, right? Or Princess Leia, she nailed it. That's true. The more you try and control these things, it has to be, we had a speaker, Mikko Alvis, who talked about you have to make the processes be the one that they would choose if they didn't have to choose a process. If it was just the natural motion, that's the motion that you should make all of your processes take, so that there's just alignment with the way that people, the developers or the operations people, would sort of naturally do things. I thought that was just a brilliant comment, because you gotta pet the dog in the right direction.
And it's not so much, Sam, not that, sorry, it's not so much the process. I mean, Dominica de Grandis is nailing it. You got to make the work visible. It's not so much any one process, it's the aggregate impact. Yeah. It's all just work, and you have limited time. And, when you got multiple queues firing at people, it's just, I'll be quiet and let somebody else talk. So.
The context switching is expensive.
Context switching is very expensive. Yeah. Awesome. All right. So if anybody else has any thoughts about last year, feel free to speak their mind. Otherwise, I'm going to switch to next year. So in less than a month, we will be in 2019. And that is ridiculous that we are already in 2019, because it feels like 2018 has just got started. But what do we think is going to be the big thing next year in DevOps? Or maybe not a big thing, maybe just something to keep in mind, something to watch out for. And I will start with, this time I'll start with Charlie's face is up this time. So Charlie, you're up. So tell us, what do you see coming in 2019?
Well, we published some predictions at Forrester, and I'm going to pick on my favorite one. And this is automation paradox. And we made a prediction that I think is going to be very surprising to people in the DevOps community, because we predicted that in some cases, mean time to recover is going to start going up. Now, this is not a naive change versus stability thing. We get that. I understand that. You get better stability in many cases by improving release cadence, improving release cycle. But there's something deeper that I'm worried about, and I've had anecdotal evidence from some awfully big companies who are decently run that MTTR is moving in some directions that is surprising to people. And I'm wondering if this is the leading edge of automation paradox, where the trouble is great. We're squashing bugs quickly. We are automating the heck out of everything. And what happens when you automate all the easy things? What's left for the people to do? All the hard things. And so you start to find that any given incident or issue or defect is a 0-day phenomenon. You've never seen it before. And so your tier 1 and your tier 2 staff have no clue, because there's no knowledge article. And in fact, I have evidence. I've had people tell me that they know that the life cycle of knowledge articles is shrinking. Well, what happens when the life cycle of articles converges to 0? It means that every problem is net new R&D. And I think John Allspaw said it very well. An incident, a true incident, is nothing more than a user story that you are going to now fulfill at times and under circumstances not of your own choosing, that are not optimal.
Sort of Murphy's Law, but of user stories. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that.
I'm looking for the leading edge of that stuff. But if anybody says that, it's the change, it's not the naive change versus stability thing. We've blown that up years ago. But this is a deeper level systems dynamics phenomenon I'm quite concerned about. So I'll leave it at that.
Does it also come into play the fact that these systems that are automated, you start to lose sight of what's actually happening?
Yes.
Like, how did this problem occur? I didn't realize the automation was doing that.
Yes.
And it's trying to fix itself, which is consternating my problems. I've just made up that word.
Well, and in a very serious note, that it was an anti-stall control on that Lion Air plane that wound up, and there's, I'm not the first person to draw analogies to Air France 447. I mean, there's a lot of people looking at aviation as, and a lot of us follow J. Paul Reed, for example. And so people look at aviation, and Lauren Hochstein said something brilliant on Twitter the other day, Netflix guy, that, the major incidents, he's seeing that they have a common pattern. They're often an aggravation of a system installed to actually ensure stability or provide safeguard. I thought that, oh man.
Which doesn't mean that there isn't a trade-off there, right? Which is a good trade-off, which we aren't having all the other problems that these systems help with, but now we're having new emergent.
Right.
As a result,
that approach our cognitive ability to deal with them.
Yeah.
You know, so
yeah.
The turtle in Kung Fu Panda, he said it best, which is one often meets the problems they seek to avoid on the path they choose to avoid them. Which is like every time I'm like, I'm going to put my beer over here so I don't spill it. And then as I'm moving the beer so I don't spill it, I spill the beer. So there you go.
Yep.
All right.
So I'd like to add to that one because I see something similar. And again, the requests I see coming in from work now are all about how do we improve resiliency? And part of that is because we go from this hardened data center where good or bad, we have processes in place to this greenfield cloud where we have nothing in place and we get stuff to the cloud and we don't know how to run it. So, part of it is we're solving some of the trivial things, but we're running into problems we never exposed. But part of it is we're not really good at running in the cloud yet. And sometimes that's because we're trying to run it the way we ran it the old way. And the big push these days is to move operations closer to the people with context, right? The developers, the business units, and we're not there yet. So now that we're releasing many, many times a day or a week instead of twice a year, the people in tier one have less and less, as you say, knowledge and less ability to solve these things, and things need to be solved faster. So there's a huge shift going on. We're releasing faster, and operations methodologies or thought hasn't been pulled as fast as the development side of it.
Totally agree.
And, I wouldn't, if you don't mind, I'll jump in on that. I think one of two predictions for 2019 is that operations is going to step into the spotlight. If you look at DevOps from its early days, it was kind of like, press the button or the button presses itself, you deploy and you start again. And, there's a whole bunch of people like me standing on the mountain going, now what? Right. So, yeah, that's great. We deployed. How do we operate this? And so, understood no ops, and the intent of no ops, but a lot of operations people heard no job, right? No respect, no future.
And you guys are running this new ops thing, right? You guys got,
So we started, actually looking at new ops as, kind of pattern to no ops, but also realizing that, Charlie, you're absolutely right. We're going to automate all the repetitive tasks. And so we need some pretty talented people to deal with these, really hard things that, whether they're incidents or operational things. Certainly seeing the rise of SRE and site reliability engineering and a lot of interest in that. And, is that the bridge to, say, ITIL or IT service management? Because SREs, manage a lot of those processes in a really new and different way. But I think operations folks are going to see 2019 as, they're going to start to be really kind of not only part of the fold, but they're going to be a really critical part of the recipe. Whereas before, it's like the definition of ops was so unclear. People called DevOps dev, or some called it ops. People I know that were developers thought ops started, the minute you left the Scrum team. And now you've got, operations and like real operating it in production, whether it's in cloud or in a data center. And these people are just totally confused because they're in the same old place. Throw it over the fence and hope somebody is there to catch it. But by the way they used to catch it doesn't work anymore, and they don't know how to catch it, in the cloud because it's in the clouds, right? Yeah. So I think ops is really going to take a pretty big place next year.
Yeah, and to that point, and to Anders' point earlier, the technology that's constantly these new little companies with this new magic beans that's going to solve one little sliver of your problem. All of this new stuff keeps coming out, and these developers are hungry for that because they're trying to solve these business problems, and they're spending their time and their energy in investigating that and experimenting with that over and over again in development. And they go, okay, I found the thing that works, and they pop it over into production. The guy's like, I've never seen this before. I have no idea what this does. I don't know how to operate it. Yeah. Right? How do I make this environment that I'm trying to keep up and running? How do I allow these folks to just bring all this random stuff in without me having any knowledge of how to operate it? So that's
where SRE, though, I think is really fascinating. It'll be interesting to see how that crosses the chasm, right? I mean, I think it's already crossed because there are lots of organizations hiring SREs, but take away all of that, it's an engineering mentality, right? So we're all engineers. right? And so folks that might have in the past not considered themselves engineered or not been considered engineers are now being tasked with taking an engineering, software engineering approach to operations. And not only does that build the bridge better, but I think it changes the substance of what we would have called operations in the past.
Yep. Jay, you've been noticeably quiet.
Well, let me tie up everything everyone said and put it into my prediction. No, I guess along the same lines of our discussion here is I think the DevSecOps trend is going to really take off next year, driven by high profile incidents and breaches and vulnerabilities. And we did some survey work on this year, and most organizations are they're keenly aware that they need to include security tooling in their CI/CD release process. But the survey showed that about half of large enterprise CI/CD workflows include any security tooling at all. So it's a little bit of a glass half full, half empty, depending on how you want to look at it. There's still that resistance from developers that security is going to slow us down. But increasingly, it's sort of like the devs that used to work in ops or the ops folks that used to work in dev. I think there's a greater appreciation that the code needs to be secure. And I think the other key here is tying security to software quality. That's sort of resonating with developers, and that will help to drive injection of some security thinking, security tooling into these processes. So that's the one thing. And then the other thing I think that we're talking about a little bit here is hybrid cloud. We've talked about the existing and the legacy applications. All of our research indicates that hybrid is continuing to grow, that hybrid is for real. And I think it's kind of interesting because we've got, we just had reInvent, you've got AWS, Azure, Google, the hyperscale public cloud providers, largely defining the IT operational paradigm for today. At the same time, the market is forcing them to consider hybrid cloud, right? A few years ago, AWS reInvent was all about only public cloud. And this year,
in fact, they had like trucks to help you move your data to their data center.
Snowmobile.
Exactly. The whole
still the highest bandwidth.
Yeah.
snowmobile. But I think it's interesting. Their definition of hybrid right now seems to be our public cloud and on-prem.
Exactly.
But the market's definition of hybrid, I'm exposed pretty regularly to large enterprises using AWS and Azure, and maybe Google and a private cloud and on-prem. So
and containers and serverless, there's some of that in there too.
Absolutely. So there's a difference in those, and I think it'll be interesting to see. I don't expect we'll see AWS talking about supporting Azure or vice versa, but we may get there to better match that market definition of hybrid.
And a bunch of people have written about this, right? I mean, Kubernetes is the new operating system,
right?
Linux is no longer. Linux lost, Kubernetes won. Not that they lost, but nobody's going to care in any new applications next year or in the years in the future what OS you're running on. That's no longer right. What's relevant is how do I store state? How do I manipulate state? How do I scale up? How do I scale down? How do I get my stuff in and out? Those are the things that really matter. And whether that's Linux, Windows, or mainframe or whatever,
on ARM chips or whatever kind of chips.
Yeah, exactly. We're going to get past that level of abstraction that we've been stuck at seemingly for so long. And I think that'll be awesome. I mean, that'll be truly interesting when that starts to accelerate the growth of things.
And we do see this spectrum of abstraction, right? I kind of like to debunk the narrative that serverless is killing containers. Serverless is built on containers. It's just a level of how much control you want to have with that. So it's sort of like kubeadmin to Knative. And organizations, nobody's dropping their containers and microservices deployment to go all serverless. A new hyperscale web scale company might go all serverless to start. And there's economic, there's efficiency appeal there. But it's going to be a mix, just like we've always seen before. Just like containers didn't kill DevOps, containers became another tool in the humongous tool box that is DevOps. So,
and it's the multi-generational nature of all this stuff that, and Charlie, we were talking about this before this started, is it's much easier to bring on board new technology than it is to retire old technology.
No, I mean, when was the last time a significant IT technology was completely retired?
Right.
Yeah.
I can't.
Hierarchical databases still being used.
But it's true. We still have mainframes. We still have VMs with our containers, and nothing's wiping anything out.
I mean, it's not like we're continuing to use these only because the cost of switching is high. I mean, some of them just happen to solve the problem in a way that we don't maybe yet know how to solve completely using new technology.
Right.
Or it hasn't been proven. And if you are Visa and you got to process a billion transactions a second, that's a heavy lift.
Yeah. Let's just go ahead and change that.
Yeah, let's just change that.
Yeah, right.
It'll be all good.
The little thing of the speed of light.
Yeah, no, that's
you run into a guy named Claude Shannon, and he doesn't. You don't push him aside too easily.
I choose to see that as less of a law than mere guidance.
All right.
Yeah. Well, it is interesting that there are so many learnings that we can take from previous folks who've gone down this journey of trying to transform process and culture and things like that. It's really interesting to see how people are applying those things to this domain, to the DevOps domain. Nobody's mentioned AI or blockchain. Are those things not going to have a material impact in 2019?
No.
What are you?
AI. I can't speak about blockchain. I mean, great. A distributed append-only ledger. Got it. Okay. That doesn't allow for repudiation. Okay, done. I'm not sure. That might play out with some assurance questions in the software supply chain to think seriously about it, but I don't see that being a thing in 2019. AI cognitive, greater intelligence absolutely is showing up notably this year in service management. It's improving call routing. It's actually driving greater efficiency of finding out, well, who can help you with your problem. And in DevOps and continuous delivery, it's increasingly used in release readiness. And I've noticed an adjacency or an intersection. Both the service management vendors like ServiceNow and Cherwell and others, as well as the CDRA vendors like Zebia Labs and Electric Cloud, are both scrutinizing proposed changes and applying analytics and producing results back as to, well, is this proposed change a good idea? Which I applaud, because I think that actually having a quantitative basis for assessing the risk of a given change, far better than having a lot of people shaking their beards and fingers at the proposed change in a change advisory board. That's not that reliable of a process. And, actually putting some machine learning on this question of, well, do we want this thing to go forward? Was it new developers? Was it all new code? Is it a new platform? What was the history in Jenkins? What does it look like from a GitHub perspective? And what's the change success rate of this team? And what's the operational stability of the current infrastructure taken as a whole? All of that should be calculated, and you can put it into a score. So I do think that there's a lot more we can do with analytics and stop being the barefoot cobbler's child, to draw on a metaphor I've used for a number of years now. So
take advantage of all the information that we have. What you're saying, right? Because the corollary there is to actually wear shoes if you're the cobbler. Yes. Okay, so I'm tracking, which is good.
Got it.
Yeah. Woo! Okay. Awesome.
So I might have an unpopular prediction in this space.
Love it. Please tell us. We love these.
So it's going to be married to machine learning AI, but it starts with everyone releasing this on-prem solutions like Amazon did. I call that all private cloud 2.0. Yeah, the market's demanding it because the market loves hugging servers. And more people are going to use these things, and they're going to fall further and further behind. And where the value is all this machine learning AI. To do that yourself, you have to be insane when you can just access APIs on the cloud. And I think those types of services are going to drive more all in the public cloud movements from large enterprises, because people are going to be focusing on plumbing with this hybrid stuff, and it's a lot of times it's hybrid for the sake of hybrid, not because there's a business reason. It's because people don't want to let go of control.
Right. And I think a lot of it just has to do with locality of reference, locality of data. Straddling and having some of your data in the cloud and some of your data local is very painful. The bandwidth just isn't there. Now maybe 5G will fix that. I'm just kidding.
No, Mike, that's a brilliant point, Mike. I totally agree, and I'm a little bit concerned that when we're going to start shutting down kind of the classic two people in a garage thing, it's a little bit harder if you're doing an AI play when really the competitive advantage comes with scale. It's the old saying, to he or she who has much, more will be given. And so, I mean, it's your SaaS providers who start bringing together all this data and doing things like benchmarking across clients. They're really going to have a compelling advantage over folks who don't have those big data sets.
There's going to be a data economy around that. I mean, there is a data economy around that. Because it's all basically spinning around ads and personal information, but it'll hopefully be more useful information.
Well, also in industries like healthcare and insurance, almost everything is third-party packages, right? No one wants to reinvent the wheel, and they're all moving to SaaS. So a lot of that data is being created in the cloud now. So why would you bring it all back?
Yeah. We have some data too that sort of backs that up in terms of what are the top features of IaaS. This is mainly public cloud that organizations are using. And I think for this year, AI, machine learning was in the top 3. And for next year, it's the top answer. And containers is also in the top 3, and then second next year. So it's sort of as IaaS goes, so goes AI. And I think that makes perfect sense because, you don't want to be doing that necessarily with your on-prem, with your private cloud.
You should trademark that.
There you go.
It just flows off the tongue. Yeah.
But I definitely appreciate the comment that that's going to drive more adoption of the cloud, the simplicity with which people will start to be able to take advantage of these very powerful fundamental technologies. And you were talking about sort of containers and AI, and I'm wondering are containers just a means to the end of being able to allow us to do things like AI? Is AI and ML a means to an end for us to do something else, right? What is AI and ML?
Yes.
Right.
Yes. So containers, another unpopular prediction, is no one's going to care about them anymore. No one's going to care about Kubernetes anymore. It's the next level of abstraction. Kubernetes is kind of a science project, and they were making it easier, and there's improvements, but the big 3 are containers as a service. And I know a lot of engineers, it still has a few security limitations, but as soon as those are solved, a lot of people are just saying, I'm done mucking with this stuff. It's like infrastructure. I just want to use this. I just want to build functionality. And machine learning and AI is the same thing, right? It's taking the plumbing out of it, but people really don't know what to do with it yet. There's like, oh, there's machine learning AI. Now what do I do? And it is a means to an end, right?
Yeah, I think software defined everything. Software defined networking, storage, all of those kinds of things. We got to figure out how to use those things still. Right? Just because we can, spin up a giant cloud with giant amounts of storage and all that doesn't mean we're going to do something interesting with them.
I've done that. I leave them running all year long, just in case.
Space heaters.
My IT department doesn't like it, just in case.
10,000 heaters.
You guys, all of this is great, but you got to create an army, right? You got to create an army of people with, new skills, and you have to create an army of there's a huge talents gap going on. So while we're talking about all these great predictions of all this cool new, software-driven global economy, we've got to be able to groom the talent. Now, the talent that's coming in, the innovative talent that's coming in very, very high demand, what does that mean? Does that mean that today's IT professional is, serving hamburgers in a fast food joint next week? Is it that we're going to start to, look at what is the real definition of this, this thing called a T-shaped professional? How do we create people that are really skilled at machine learning and how to author it? How do we create, armies that are skilled at moving from an on-prem to a cloud? I think that's asked and answered, but there's so much that they could exploit that they don't know. DevSecOps, that's great, but I'm security. I was at RSA this past year. There's a lot of curiosity about it, but there is a learning path that we have to really look at. And I've talked to a lot of organizations that say my transformation's only gotten so far. Hi, Charlie.
No, I was waving at housekeeping. They not.
Is what it was.
Charlie.
Funny, dramatic pause.
Sorry.
He was waving in vehement agreement.
Yes, violent agreement.
Sorry.
No, seriously, we have to really look at, this. How do we groom this army? Because I've talked to too many organizations that say, we've taken our transformation so far. The reason we can't go that much farther is we can't find the skills.
Right.
And so I don't know that they're teaching it at university. I don't know that self-taught, and so again, we've got this really great, ambitious predictions, and we don't necessarily have the talent to fulfill it.
Yeah, this is a hot button for me, Jane, as you know. And I didn't introduce myself. Another hat I wear is I'm an adjunct faculty at the University of St. Thomas in St. Paul, Minnesota, which is the largest graduate program in software in the United States. And so I'm very attuned, and I've gone to a lot of conferences this year. I've gone to DevOps Enterprise Summit. I've gone to reInvent. I'm here at KubeCon, conferences that range from a few hundred people to 50,000. I am not seeing the academic community here. I am not seeing top tier professors from R1 schools. I'm not seeing researchers. I mean, you've got so little engagement, and I'll call the computer science academic community out on this one. Where are you people? We've got a workforce problem going on here, and you are all just going after peer review and trying to play that game. And in the meantime, you're teaching your students waterfall.
Because and I think that's a problem because and it's a little bit of a problem I think in the U.S. as well because and being Swedish, a little bit of a perspective on this. There's no vocational education in the United States.
Yeah,
it's either academic or you're flipping burgers. There's no notion of instruction.
No, that's not entirely true. I mean, there is an aspect of truth to what you're saying, but we have a tiered education system here, and I've deliberately made a choice to not teach it in R1. I teach at a big teaching university, and then there's vocational and community colleges and state universities that do have a more vocational mandate, although it's not just purely pressing buttons. And we've got a spectrum of educational response in this country. The trouble is that these lower tier educational systems look to the R1s, and there's been a failure of educational leadership at the very top levels here. I'll also call out the Association for Computing Machinery and the IEEE while I'm at it,
Cool.
Yeah, no,
Charlie had some Wheaties and extra coffee today. Holy cow.
No, but it really is a serious problem because, we talk about continuous learning, certainly, the third way, and if we're going to practice. And so we have this huge gap between what you learn at university, what you teach yourself, right? What you learn on the street, so to speak, right? And yet organizations are actively, at these conferences, a lot of the booths are manned by talent acquisition because they're desperately hunting anyone. And that leads to also kind of, misappropriation of talent. I could declare myself tomorrow as a DevOps engineer, guru, ninja, pick any of the terms. I could tell you that I'm an expert in AI, right? Because nobody else on the team is. And I could know nothing about this, or well, maybe a little bit, but enough to talk about it intelligently, but not necessarily enough to do it. And they'll pay me a lot of money to do that. So you run the risk of we're not teaching it, we're not grooming the current workforce, and then
we don't know a rubric, right? There's no rubric for it.
There's no rubric for it, and then you also have these folks that will self-declare that I'm an expert at again, expert, ninja, guru. I love the names, right? But I'm something that has absolutely no basis in fact. It's not a real skill. That's why I like SRE. SRE is a real job. Right. So we can say, are you an SRE? Yes. Okay. But so again, I think 2019, we're going to see a lot more of that talent gap. Hopefully we'll start to address it. But I also think this concept of a T shape, hopefully will provide a little bit more direction on, what your core competency is. What should you be doing at the top of the T?
Well, this is another thing that's driving, I think, this efficiency factor in DevOps. Organizations, you want to release faster, iterate software, and you also need to manage, 10,000 nodes with a team of 5 to a dozen. The way that AWS or Google or Azure, which by the way are the top certifications that people are seeking now, but I'm not sure that they're going to be able to, because everyone knows they can't hire an army of these folks because it doesn't exist. If it did, you couldn't afford it.
Right.
So
and their architectures don't support that kind of operational model. That's the part of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, for an existing organization, that is the hardest part. How do you shift your architecture around so that you'll fit into the cloud?
And you can do it if it's a pocket or two, right? You want to scale it across your whole organization.
In a 5-pound bag. Yeah. Even though that bag can dynamically expand and contract, it doesn't. It still doesn't hold all the All right.
It's not the TARDIS.
That's right. So we have one more topic that we can talk through. We don't have a ton of time, but in 2019, what are some of our New Year's resolutions that as a community, as an industry, that we should maybe focus on? It sounds like training and skilling people is going to be a big focus, according to Jane. What are some of the other things that people think we need to do better? And let's see, Jay, I'll start with you.
Put those security folks in the same room as the DevOps folks, and maybe the data analytics folks too. And we can take another step on the journey to AI and ML nirvana. But I think that organizations have to, when we look at half of CI/CD workflows in the enterprise not having any security tooling at all, there's room for improvement there. And so I think, do you train developers how to think with security? No, not necessarily. I think, again, it's got to be like the successful DevOps implementations that I've been exposed to have people on them that have worked in dev and in ops, or vice versa. And so I think hopefully we'll start seeing people that are working in these different domains that include security and data analytics and database administrators, these things. And our research indicates that is happening. But I think the speed at which it happens will depend largely on, how many high-profile security incidents we have and those types of things. Because anytime that happens, that drives that security thinking.
Thank God.
Yeah. Excellent. Okay. Let's see. Mike, what do you think we're going to need to do better in 2019?
We're going to have to push the message to focus on value instead of technology, right? And we're also going to have to push the message that you need to invest in organizational change management, human capital type activity, because the technology can take you so far. And I've been working with a lot of clients for many years, and the people, they don't really need me for technology anymore. Actually, some of them probably have advanced me now because they work on it day to day, but there's people and process things that keep them from having success. And I think, we got to get out of our tech beanie hats and start thinking about the hard stuff, the people and process.
The people and the process. That's great. And it's funny because since I've been at Electric Cloud, which is now about 5 years, seems like we talk an awful lot about people, culture, process, all that stuff. But apparently the people who are listening to us talk about people and culture, process, have a hard time changing. So just putting that out there. Okay, let's see. Jane, we're talking all about something that you really care a lot about. So I'm going to pitch it back to you. What do you think we need to do better at as a community in 2019?
So I agree with Mike about organizational change management, although with all due respect, Mike, I hate that term because it's so surgical. It sounds like we could surgically remove our old cultures and surgically attach a new one. And so I do think that mindfulness, and I do think that we need to look at the human aspects of transformation, because truthfully, companies don't transform, humans transform. And so I do think that we need to kind of look at it from a how do we inspire, transformational leadership? I know the Accelerate report really has called that out as well. How do we inspire humans who have opinions and have mortgages and have, all sorts of other kind of baggage that they carry with them? But how do we start to create that kind of human aspect of how do we do this? Because that's hard. We can buy tools, we can implement tools, we can learn new technology. Transforming people, man, that's really, really hard because, man, they've got opinions, right? And also jump jobs. I mean, in today's talent market, they're so busy jumping jobs that you transform one and they go take it to somebody else. So I agree with you, Mike. I just don't like the term.
Maybe it's not so much, I was just thinking about this, maybe it's not so much a transformation as it is an evolution, right? Because guess what? As you're evolving, there's going to be some sort of cul-de-sacs on that evolutionary highway. And so you just got to know what those are.
Well, and just if you don't mind, I add one more thing. You have 4 generations in the workplace right now. So, you've got, not only do you have a usual cultural thing, you have generations that are retiring out, millennials are going to turn 30. So they're going to start taking on management roles and managing budget, right? And if they're not already. So you've got this big generational gap as well. And so, Lord help the CIO that has to manage 20-year-olds and 60-year-olds.
Yeah. Or me.
Or me.
Well, there are some lost causes, so
Yeah. So, Charlie, what are some of the things that you think we should focus on in 2019?
Well, one thing, I'm going to echo both of the themes here. So, in terms of one kind of personal New Year's resolution I have is to, at some point, get over to the local business school, Carlson School of Management, and talk to some of the professors in organizational development, because that's a thing, and I think we keep talking about how we've got this big operating model problem in digital organizations. It's like, there are people who go to school for this. There are people who have PhDs in this stuff. What do they say? So that's my personal kind of take on it is are we leaving, because, a lot of DevOps in the Phoenix Project, a lot of that was a re-examination based on fundamental stuff that came out of Lean, queuing theory. There's deeper foundations that we, can draw from. And then on the security side, totally agree, everything Jay said as well. I'm going to sharpen it a little bit. We've issued a predictions very specific to the digital tool chain. I'm extremely concerned that we're going to see a very high profile compromise of a digital pipeline involving, GitHub and, tooling, various vendors we all know and love. Bear in mind that the Target breach, there's not documentation, but it's very difficult to see how those hackers would have patched an average of 40 registers in 1,800 stores unless they had compromised the release automation, earlier generation release automation for the point of sale system. So I think about, a fundamentally compromised CDRA pipeline. When it's been scaled out across an enterprise, it's an extremely scary thought. And we've got a prediction that, it may not happen, and I'll be glad if it doesn't, but we're on the record with a prediction that this is going to happen to somebody, and it's not going to be pretty.
I'm on the same page with you. I think that, security is one of the few existential threats to a company in that sense, other than, of course, competition and disruption. But, oh my God, it sucks to be in competition these days. But it's one of those things where, you said before, people don't want to do security because it's going to slow me down. And in a sense, if I make the analogy to a seatbelt, yes, it's going to slow you down. That's its purpose, to keep you from slamming your face into the windshield. So you have to take some of that with also just the good practices around the software supply chain. And I think right now, our software supply chain is unencrypted. It's willy-nilly HTTP downloads of third-party software that we all do. It would be lovely if Maven Central could at least enforce that we all do HTTPS downloads of the third-party bits and not allow sort of this big open man-in-the-middle attack hole that we have.
Right.
So I think there's something like that is going to happen because it's just too ripe a fruit for somebody to try to block.
Yeah. If you can't put something bad in the flour or the water, then you have somebody drop it in the production line.
Yeah.
So
I think unfortunately I don't want to say it's a certainty that something like that is going to happen, but we're not taking all the steps we need in order to prevent it, or even in fact to detect it, as the recent security breach where a certain company installed new security software and realized they'd been hacked back in 2014.
Right.
And that's not a good feeling to have, that somebody's been living rent free in your basement for 5 years and you didn't know.
Yeah.
There's been a lot of that going on, and that part of the story I think wasn't actually told very well in the press. The message in the press was, oh, data back to 2014. That's not what happened. They were hacked in 2014, and that stuff has been vulnerable since then. To me, that's a very different story, and those need to be told more. And I think that what the industry can do, and I know this is going to be very difficult because whoever does it gets crushed probably the first few times. You got to tell the story. You got to tell the story of how it happened, how what the problems were, because that's a teaching moment.
Yeah.
And those are, you don't get those very often at that scale. And I just hope that happens more and more, because people can look at that and say, oh shit, we're doing the same thing. And we're not doing the same thing.
Right.
And take steps. I think that has to happen more. And that's difficult to do, because anybody who's going to put themselves out there and sort of do a NTSB style rundown of what actually happened is in for a world of hurt when they do it. But it's also going to be very valuable teaching them.
Very good. All right. Well, we are at the top of the hour. I have one more thing that I want to sort of touch on. Over the past couple of years, we've had the pleasure of having lots of really great people join us on C9D9. Last year, we lost one of our more frequent guests, one of our more outspoken guests. He's a bright spot in the DevOps community, Rob Stroud. He was a fantastic analyst over at Forrester, chief product officer over at Zebia, valued friend. He was a competitor for a while. He was a friend for a lot longer. We all miss you. I wish you could be here with us. So with that, I want to thank everybody for joining for our year-end episode. Be well. I hope that you have peace in the new year, and we will talk to you all later. All right.
Happy New Year.
You too. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.